Wherever you're listening from, hello. I'm Linda France, climate writer at Newcastle University in New Writing North, speaking to you today from Northumberland. I'm going to start with a poem that tries to puzzle out the ethics of flying. It's called Flygskam. Flygskam is a Swedish word that literally means flight shame, but it refers to the environmental guilt arising from air travel. Some say it's better translated as flight conscience. Flygskam. At the bottom of my itinerary, it says, flight's calculated average CO2 emissions is 546.44 kg person. I am that person, and I don't know what 546.44 kg average CO2 emissions are. I imagine them as a toxic cloud speckled with charcoal dust. Feel the sky-wide weight of it on my back, the burden of Atlas, hero, victim, martyr. If I touched it, it would be cold, smelling faintly of gas, as if I'd forgotten to turn the cooker off after boiling milk for my morning coffee. The milk spills, the blue flame gutters and goes out, the gas leaks. The coffee's travelled from South America. I sit and drink it in my kitchen in Northumberland. The gas is siphoned in from a tank in my garden I'm trying to disguise by growing a hedge of hawthorn and willow, the grass in front frilled with snowdrops. 3 times a year a tanker comes to fill it up. The pipe makes a sound between humming and hissing. A long, black, poisonous snake slithering through the gate across the lawn. A few weeks later I get a bill for more than I can afford. It's February, the old stone house freezing with no heating on. I sip my coffee, read my flight itinerary, and look it up. 546.44 kg of CO2 is more than half of all the emissions the worker on a coffee plantation in Colombia would produce in a year. A white, winged thing thrashes in my chest, struggling to fly free. As part of this year's Alumni Day of Action with its One Planet focus, we put out a call inviting submissions for an online anthology of poems addressing the tangled issues of climate change, mass extinction, and the related health and environmental disasters we're currently facing. In this podcast, I'm going to talk you through the anthology, quoting lines and phrases from each of the poems, and finish up with a couple of my own, written during the residency. You can find the anthology online to download and read in your own time. I very much hope you enjoy it and it stirs your own thoughts in helpful directions. One Planet is actually our only home, and the anthology is bookended with poems that highlight that deep-rooted awareness and need. In Bernadette McAloon's Wild Pont Valley, wind still runs ribbons through the grasses, clouds still tumble amethyst shadows. Here the peewit pours her injured song. More domestically, just as poignantly, Anna Woodford's memories of her childhood back garden lie beneath an image of the present where, she writes, my husband wrestles down ivy in our own backyard, trying to shore up the little walls around our family. The destruction we're witnessing is happening in all our backyards. And as Susan Oldsberg points out in her poem, we need to worry before we go, what footprints people leave on earth below. Fortunately, nature is persistent, irrepressible, summoned in Ellen Fethian's Rosebay Willow Herb, John Agapitidis's Elemental Wind, and Leslie Mountain's Red Kite. You can't kill the spirit, they say. Let the wind undistracted help save the planet, and life can thrive against the grain. In her beautifully deft poem, Chris Johnson takes us to the Great North Museum to contemplate the death pelts of Hancock's animals: auk, raccoon, lynx, beaver, fulmar, grey wolf or bison, creatures taken from their mothers that help her mourn our shared losses, all the species already gone and those facing extinction. The painful truth of wildfires in Australia, glaciers melting on the Hudson River, and the wanton proliferation of plastic litter is faced in powerful poems from Konstantinos Valtetsiotis, Susan Millett, and David Archer. Our dependence on fossil fuels comes under scrutiny in John Challis's poem To a Coal-Fired Power Station, which carefully calculates the price we paid for our world with the world's blood. Rachel Craig turns her attention to the current pandemic, which has thrown our need to act into sharp relief. We can work together. The time is now, she writes. What kind of future are we creating? Sue Lee Chin's poem also ends with a question. Will the world take another chance and imagine a better tomorrow? We look ahead into an uncertain future, but Simon Winch's nostalgic and playful sonnet declares its faith in Newcastle dons with sage advice, who might show right from wrong and see wrong seasons right. Bryony Kapoor takes Andrew Marvell as her muse to expose the vanity of man, who, with his awakened stare, is heedless of his proper share. To grab life that's not yours to take does bring destruction in its wake. Human misjudgment, greed and global injustice are also the subjects of poems by Leslie Mountain and Daniel Hines. We let the water fall through our hands. I've closed the anthology with one of my own poems where hands are the abiding image. We've all become more aware of them with all the hand washing and sanitising required to keep the COVID-19 infection at bay. It also struck me that as well as being sources of risk, our hands are what we give and help each other with. Vulnerability and generosity, two sides of what makes us human. Another place of contradiction and pressure around climate change is the fact of denial, aversion, how much, for many different reasons, people, all of us, look away from what needs to be done, as if the problems were too enormous and overwhelming to face. And so here's my poem, called A Cure for Blindness. Only when they're empty and raw do you discover the cure for blindness is in your hands. In each open palm and eye, seeing what needs to be given. A loaf, a lift, some folded notes, shadow play of touch. When what you own and know and love, all that keeps you safe, is what's asked, your fingers threaten to break with the whole earth's weight, bones brittle with seeing, all the holding this blind world needs, every ounce of letting go. but the eyes in your palms never blink, shed small pearls of water to rinse your unbound hands. One planet is a symbol of where we live, the global culture we are part of, and also an imperative for what we need to do to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. This is a time to celebrate and harness humanity's greatest strength, diversity, inextricable from the diversity of all species. Every single strand of life on this planet is woven into an interconnected whole, a oneness not always visible or appreciated, but important to keep at the very centre of our minds. The only way to handle what our environmental crisis is demanding of us is to broach it together. Roshi Joan Halifax also reminds us, we are always in free fall. It's not like we will find some moral high ground where we are finally stable and can catch all those falling around us. It's more like we are all falling above the infinite groundlessness of life, and we learn to become stable in flight and to support others to become free of the fear that arises from feeling unmoored. The final resting place is not the ground at all, but rather the freedom that arises from knowing there will never be a ground. And yet here we are, together, navigating the boundless space of life, not attached, yet intimate. So, in that spirit, one last poem. After 6 months' absence over lockdown, I recently went back in to Newcastle city centre and I wrote this poem, like my first, also about flying, but this time catching the last of the swallows just before they left for their long migration across the equator. Flight of the Swallows. I count 17 swallows on the wire as I open and close the farm gate. 17 swallows don't make a flock, but beaks lifted to the late sun. They queue for their tickets south. I'll miss them when they go, breaking the nets they've spun round my roof this watchful summer. I drive east, slowly. 2 seasons have passed since I was last in the city. The streets are flocked. There's nothing that isn't human or man-made except the sky. Outside M&S, 2 girls sing, holding mics as if they were on TV. Their voices, birdsong. I'll miss them when I go. All day the sky is reliably blue. May we all fly in the same direction. Yes, may we all fly in the same direction. May we all be safe and well and protect each other and our beloved planet from harm. Thank you to all the poets for their thoughtful and inspiring poems. And thanks to you for listening. "17 swallows don't make a flock."